السلام عليكم ورحمة الله العافية. هذا الفيديو هو الفيديو الثاني لللاب 5 اللي هو كلاسز 2. نبلش بحل السؤال. في مطلوب منا نعمل define للكلاس test. Write the definition of class test with the following members as shown in the above model diagram. First we just do this class in the name of the test, the name of the class. Go down, two curly braces and a semicolon فاصلة مضغوطة. في عندنا two scopes in the class, private and public scope. أول member عندنا اللي هو mark. It's an array of type integer with 5 elements. So إذا بدنا نيجي نعرفها we do this integer mark 5. That's it. Now عشان عرفنا انها بالprivate because it has a negative sign before it and the members that are in public has a positive sign before their names basically. بس نيجي نبلش تعريف اللي هو constructors. We have a parameterized constructor, this one, and a non-parameterized constructor. خلينا نبلش بال non-parameterized constructor. This is how we define it. It's the name of the class. Basically that's the name of the constructor or destructor. So basically now بدنا نعمل initialize the values. As we said, the constructor's purpose is it's called once an object is created. So we have to initialize the values or the variable, let's say the member variables in our class. In this case we have mark. So let's just for integer h equals 0, less than 5, h plus plus, mark of h equal minus 1. For every mark in this, the 5 elements equal minus 1. ليش حطينا minus 1? Because we want an impassable value عشان نيجي نقدر نفرق بين let's say two objects. We have to distinguish between them. An object that we have initialized but basically using a default constructor or any constructor but a default constructor but haven't set the marks for it yet. ما حطينالوش علامات. So basically in the case of this default constructor we initialize the values with minus 1. So we know this object has only 5 marks of minus 1 that are impossible to achieve. That's why we assign minus 1 instead of 0 or 1, because there are marks that are 0 or 1. Because if let's say the scale of our marks is 0 to 100, إذا كان عندنا السكيل من 0 ل 100 فلو حاطين أي علامة in this case in the default initialize like let's say 2, someone can actually get that mark. So we might mistake this object for a real object that has real marks inside of it instead of negative 1. So we can do minus 1, we can do minus 99, it doesn't matter. So it's just an impossible mark in the scope that we're working with. Now let's say that we basically have another object that is initialized with values for the marks. We can know that this object is basically has real marks by checking with an if statement if the value is not equal to minus 1. So we know basically, or let's say if we put it to minus 5, we have to check if the value is equal to minus 5 and etc. Basically that's the approach we go with. هسه نمشي بال parameterized constructor that has parameter basically type integer array. So in this case عندنا parameterized constructor. شو الهدف منه هالconstructor? That we assign the values that are of this parameter to the mark variable. So what we do, we either do this for h equals 0, h less than 5, h plus plus, mark of h equal error of h. This can work. There's another way we can do it later after we finish the setMark function that is a lot easier and basically saves some memory because we don't have to define the same thing twice. Okay, now let's go to the destructor. And the destructor has this sign before it. So do it, test, and you open the scope of the destructor. The destructor is basically a function that is called once the object is terminated or reach its end of lifespan. مقصود بهالحكي لما الاوبجكت ينتهي شغله بينتهي السكوب تاعه basically بدناش يضل ياخذ مكان من الميموري, let's say portion of the memory, لأنه we deallocate that memory. So how we do that? We terminate the object to deallocate that memory or the other resources that this object is taking. في هدف ثاني we can do to this with this destructor is that we can basically print out a statement or do something before the object is terminated. So we can do this. We can, in this case, you can see in the output, this is what happens once we terminate an object. It prints out this statement. So that's the statement that shows us that the object is terminated in our case. نحن جينا كتبنا هاي الستيتمنت because we want it to be our output to match the output in the test cases, to be precise. Now let's go to the setMark function. We have the function setMark, void, its return data type is void, setMark, and it receives an array of type integer as a parameter. استقبل array of type integer as a parameter. بهالفانكشن الهدف منه that we set the marks that are from this parameter to the mark variable. طب نحن هالشيء اشتغلناه من قبل. وين اشتغلناه من قبل؟ اشتغلناه بال parameterized constructor. إذا بتلاحظوا we did this before. So we copy this, we put it here. وبدناش يضل الشيء مكتوب مرتين. We can call that function instead. We call setMark with the array. هيك بكون we don't define it twice فمن أقل memory usage. نفس الوقت هيك less code lines that we have to write. Okay, so this is setMark. Basically take the values in this array and we assign them to the values in the mark array. هسه في عندنا function اللي هو getter function اللي هو getMark. Its return type is void in this case. We've talked about this before, that if we want to return more than let's say one element, we cannot do that in C++. We can either return one thing or we can return a pointer to an array. So one variable can return the value of one variable, or we can return the pointer to an array. So in this case, we basically are going to change the values of this array. In this case, let's just type this function getMark int array. This. So basically, any changes to this array are going to be shown. Basically, are going to change to the array that basically was sent with this function and where it was called. يعني أي تغيير على الأري هاي راح يحصل داخل الفانكشن، راح يحصل على المكان اللي استدعينا فيه هذا الفانكشن بالأري اللي استدعيناه فيه. ليش؟ لأنه any array that we send, basically we do not send the entire array, we send a pointer to that array. So any changes we do to that other name, so basically this, you can call it that this is by reference. You can say that this is by reference, basically almost by reference, but this is basically another pointer of basically that, let's say that we've named an array here called let's say A5. So if we basically call an object test1 t1.getMark, for example, with A. In this case, any changes we do to this array are gonna reflect on this array, because this is another pointer that points to what A is pointing at, basically. So let's start with this function. Let's start defining this function. Okay, for integer h equals 0, h less than 5, h plus plus. We're gonna go element by element. راح نيجي نمشي element by element. Okay, remove this. Actually, we don't need this because it's one statement. arr of h equals mark of h. هاي الحالة أي قيمة mark, we're gonna assign it to the corresponding index for array. In this case, basically, that's basically us returning the values in a different way. We don't use the return statement. We've done with the set function and the get function. Now let's go to the print function. The print function عندنا of type void, بتلاحظوا, and constant. I didn't touch on this before in the explanation part of this let's say question, but basically what it means is that this print function is a constant function. It can only see values but it cannot change them. هاي الهدف من هالفانكشن. هذا الفانكشن print هو فانكشن constant ثابت، بيقدر يشوف الفاليوز but it cannot change them. ما بيقدر يعدل عليهم، بيقدرش يعدل على الفاليوز اللي هو بيشوفها in the class. So how do we define this? We define void print then const. That's how we do it. Basically, let's say we want to, we've talked about this before. The print statement, the print function only prints the grades for the object. So basically the mark array in this case. So for integer h equals 0, h less than 5, h plus plus, you can use I or whatever you want for iteration. Cout, in this case, mark of h, and is space afterwards. After we finished, we do an end line. That's how we finish the print function. Now let's go into the getAllGreater function. The getAllGreater function receives the parameter of type integer and returns an object of type test. So that's the return that type is of type test. So let's just define it. Test getAllGreater integer a, for example. What do we need to do with getAllGreater? This function returns object of class test that contains all the marks that are greater than the given parameter. So for integer, h equals 0, h less than 5, h plus plus, if mark of h bigger or equal, في يعني حكيت في خربطة, this should be get all greater or equal, but in this case mark h is bigger or equal, is greater or equal to a, so we're going to return it. How are we supposed to return it? In this case we define an object of type test. Let's call it test t1. We do t1 dot mark of h equals mark of h. هسه هون بهالحالة في عندنا خربطة. شو الخربطة راح تصير؟ ممكن أول علامة تكون أكبر من هذا البارامتر، بل العلامة الثانية مش أكبر. فبهالحالة راح يكون في عندنا فراغات. ممكن إنه الأولى in the first index 0 we have a mark in this test object, but the second one we have rubbish, right? And the third one we have a mark. So in this case we define a counter equals 0. In this case, and we do this count plus plus. So in this case we can get up to 5 marks if all 5 marks are bigger than that parameter, but if they're not bigger we can still get to like 2 or 3 marks or 4 or 1, but they're still in sequence. راح يجوا على الترتيب. راح يجوا بهالحالة هالشيء راح يجي يكون بالزيرو راح يكون في عندي مارك، بال1 راح يكون عندي مارك، حسب إذا عندنا أكثر. let's say we have 4 marks that are bigger than this parameter. راح يجي يكون عندنا الزيرو راح يكون فيها مارك، الاندكس 0 راح يكون فيه مارك بالاوبجكت t1. index 1 is going to have a mark, index 2 and index 3 ما راح يكون في عندنا فراغات. That's why we use this count variable as an index. So this is the getAllGreater function, but we haven't finished it. We have to return t1. Basically I've touched on the destructor of the class. حكيت عن الdestructor من قبل. In this case this is not going to terminate in the scope. This t1 is not going to terminate in the scope. ليش؟ لأنه return t1 is going to return the t1 hasn't terminated yet. It's going to be sent to the place where it's called. إذا بتلاحظوا place is called, let's say in main. فبهالحالة its value is going to be copied to another test object. So this t1 is not terminating until that function is terminated. I mean that object is terminated. So that object is going to be a replacement for this object in terms of, let's say, the destruction as it's for the destructor basically. So this is basically why destructor is hard to basically follow. Like you cannot follow the statements of a destructor easily. Okay, this is getAllGreater. Now getAllLess, this function returns a number of marks less than the given parameter. So we have this function is return the type of type integer. برجع عدد الماركس اللي هم أقل من البارامتر اللي بنبعث لهم اياه. فخلينا نعرف هذا الفانكشن. Let's go copy this, okay, paste it here, remove this integer a, and it returns an integer. فوت على الفانكشن بده يشوف ايش return number of marks less than the given parameter. بده counter integer count equals 0. for integer h equals 0, less than 5, h plus plus. If mark of h less than a, what do we do? Count plus plus. Return count. That's basically getAllLess. That's the function getAllLess. Now we have the average function. basically the average function. Let's go to the average function. It's returned that tab is void, so it's void average, this average, and it has a parameter that's passed by reference. Double, let's say A in this case. Okay. فالaverage راح نجي نحطه بالvariable A and pass it by reference in this case, since we're not going to return it using the return statement. Let's say what are we going to do? Let's say we have A equals 0, pointer H equals 0, H less than 5, H plus plus. نجمع العلامات بعدين نقسمهم على عددهم. هذا الافرج فعليا. ف A plus equal mark of H, so we have all of the marks in A. بس هنا في فرق لازم نعمل double. يعني it's not necessary. Sometimes the compiler implicitly casts it, بيعمل casting implicitly. بس خلاص, let's use the quick cast. This is the quick cast to quick cast this value since it was an integer, array of integer values, just to be sure, because it depends on the compiler in this case. So A equal A divided by 5, since we know there was only 5 grades in that, and that's how we finish this. This is all of the changes for this is gonna be reflected on that, on the place where we call this function. فأي تغيير راح يجي نعمل reflect على ال variable اللي this is another name for the variable we call the function with, basically. هذا اسم ثاني للفاريبل استنى فيه الفانكشن بعتنا مع الفانكشن. Okay, now let's go. We have finished the members of the test class. Now فينا test compare. This is a function that's a non-member function that returns the list with the higher past unit number. So we leave the class scope. Test compare test G1 test G2 footer function. So it returns the list with the higher past student number. How do you know that a student has passed? لازم يجي فوق ال 50 logically. He has to get over 50. Over 50 out of 100 for him to pass. Any student has to get over 50. فالطالب لازم يجي فوق ال 50 عشان ينجح. In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to define two variables. Let's say I'll call count1 equals 0 and count2 equals 0. So basically we're going to do this. For integer h equals 0, h less than 5, h plus plus. We can basically go and basically check every mark for every class, but we can also use what? We can use this function. Why? Get all list. This function contains number of marks less than a given parameter. So if we see which marks are less than 50, in this case, let's say, okay, let's do this. Count1 equals G1 dot get all less 50, and count2 equals G2 dot get all less than 50. إذا بنعرف إنه قديش عدد القيم الأقل من 50 للجي 1 وكانت أقل من القيم اللي أقل من 50 للجي 2 الأقل، فهو عنده إيش؟ عدد أكبر من الناس الناجحين، صحيح؟ فإذا if count 1 والعكس صحيح، ف if count 1 is less than count 2، يعني عندي نحكي مثلا بهالحالة عندي count 1 had one basically one value less than 50 and count 2 had two values less than 50. فمعناته اللي هو الجي 1 اللي هو التست جي 1 has طالب واحد بس has one guy that has failed، طالب واحد بس رسب، وجي عنده طالبين رسبوه، فبهالحالة count 1 عنده عدد أكبر من الناجحين. then return G1 else return G2. عكس صحيح. So basically that's how we define the compare function. Now let's go to the main. We're finished with the functions. Now let's go to the main. First we have basically the input from 10 integers represent the grades at two tests. Okay, so we define two arrays, 2 5 basically of type integer. Should define them like this better so for clarity. هيك افضل انه نعرفهم عشان يكون الاشي واضح واسهل قراءته. Okay, test T1 or let's say A1 A2 in this case. We have two test objects of A1 and A2. A1 dot when array of array 1 array 2, okay, array 1 array 2 with 5 elements each. Okay, in this case let's say we have 10 values, right? We're gonna iterate on these values. Less than 5, h plus plus, cnn, the array 1 for h. We do this again for array 2 of h. So that now we've inputted these two values. We can use the setMark function for this function to set the marks. So a1 dot setMark. In this case, okay, let's just go down. Let's go up in here. a1 dot setMark of a1, a2 dot setMark of array 2. هيك حطينا الvalues الgrades in the a1 and a2 object. Now we've finished putting the grades. Now we have to basically in the output you must call the function to your code. So see this was a good illustration of auto output format. We have to match this output format. So cout grades and average. Okay, let's just in double quotations grades and average at first test end line, and we have to print out the marks for the first test. Now we've created a function اللي هو عملنا function called print إذا بتلاحظوا that prints out the marks already. So let's use that function. We can either print them out from here or we can use the function. It's better to use that function so that we don't have to rewrite the same code more than once. That's the point of classes. Reusability, the reusability of these functions. We can reuse them as many times as we want and not write the code more than once. So a1.print. Now this is gonna print, and then we need to call the average function. What was it? A1. Okay, this function is not gonna print out anything, so basically we have to define double, let's say variable called k, type double. Now we're gonna send this k variable to the average function. So a1.average with k. So now we have the, after basically this function finishes, it's gonna put the value of a in k. Basically the changes that can happen to a are gonna happen to k, to the variable k. So let's do this. We print out the average. Cout average equals, and then we print out k end line. So that's for the first test. Now let's do it. Let's just copy this for the second test. Copy this again. Okay, at second test we change this to second. a1.print, no, it's going to be a2.print in this case, and a2.average, and we don't have to redefine k, already defined it. So, and even if we send it again, it's going to get the first, the value is 0, it's going to get 0, it's going to start over, so it's fine, we don't have to reinitialize it here. Okay, in this case we've done this bit. Now we have to do this. A grades, basically let's bigger equal IE bigger or equal to 90 at first test. So let's print this out. That's what we want to print. Grades that are basically NA, basically, which are greater or equal to 90. Okay, I.E bigger or equal 90 at first test, and this end line. So how do we check if grades are bigger than, greater than, or equal to a value? We use the function that we've already defined, get all greater. So let's use for the first test. So a1 dot get all greater. That's how it's defined, I think. Yep. Okay, and we do 90 because that's the value we want to check. So let's go to that function. Does it print anything out? Nope, it just returns a test case, an object of type test, basically. So what we're going to do is we can define test t, let's name it a3 equals a1 dot get all greater 90. Now if we want to print out the marks in a3, what we're going to have to do is a3 dot print, since we're going to print all the marks that are not equal to -1. As we go back to our print statement, we didn't check if the marks are not equal to -1. There's a mistake here. We have to change this because we don't want, if you see the output, it only prints let's say the marks that are not equal to -1 in our case. So if the mark, let's say mark of h does not equal -1, we have to check this in the print function. See out, otherwise don't do anything. It's fine. Okay, now done this part. Now this is test with more pass grades. Which one gives us the test? This is the test comparison, basically. That's what it means. So we have to copy this, see out, more pass grades, and then end line we call which function, which is the compare function. With we first have, because it returns an object of type test, we have to define another object. It's called a4 equal compare between a1 and a2. Now what does the compare do? It returns only that function. Now once we done this with more pass grades, we have to print out the test that has the more pass grades. So a4.print. This equal statement is a you can actually copy an object from basically the object type test, its value is copied to a4 basically in that case. So a4.print. Now let's check. We have everything. Yep, run. Okay, we have mistake. Yeah, average has to be capital, so we have to change this to a capital, and we have to wait 30 seconds because of the new rules for the path code. You can only run basically run your code or submit it every 30 seconds. So let's run it now. Have to wait for 7 seconds. So this is basically it. This is how we finished this class. Classes to this question. Basically, that's basically what it needs. So let's run it again. Okay, it says a perfect match and everything. Now, basically, the explanation of when the destructor is called, you can basically check out Wikipedia on destructors in general or destructors in C++. But generally, they're called backwards from the last last object to the first object in general. The first two ones that were called the end of class test are these ones. I'll show you that are in this. What was it? This one, the compare function. G1 and G2. Basically, these are the ones that are called first because they're done. They were the last function that was called, like last compare. So, in this scope, basically, these are the first basically objects that are done. Then we go with basically terminated, and then we go with other objects backwards. Basically, terminate them backwards on that scope, and that's about it. فعليا هاي الاوبجكتس زي ما شرحت لكم بتنتهي انه كيف بينتهوا باك يعني ريفيرس ان ريفيرس. اول اوبجكت اللي هو انا فاهم هون الفانكشن هون هالكومبير a1 a2 go back to the function compare and you find out that تلاحظ انه في عنا test g1 g2 and these have to be terminated etc. الى اخره. ف every object can have to be terminated in its scope from, let's say, from the last object that was created من اخر object عملنا له create لاول object عملنا له create. واذا بنعمل submit كود شغال على كل شيء. اذا عندكم اي سؤال تقدروا تراسلوني على ايميلي اللي هو awsb.just. I'm gonna type it here عشان معنوش. awsb.just@gmail.com لأي أسئلة بالنسبة لهذا اللاب أو باللاب السابق اللي أعطيته على اللي موجود على اليوتيوب دكتور وائل مرديني إن شاء الله. والله يعطيكم العافية.